Welcome to another Reset Ministries podcast where everything we talk about revolves around changing from the inside out. I'm here today with Julie and my husband, Jeff. Jeff, what are we going to talk about today?
The permission to play.
Permission to play. Now, is play something we actually need permission to do?
As adults, we shouldn't, but it seems like we really do.
I remember somebody saying in one of our groups, he said, have you noticed that when kids are little, they just want to play and you have to force them to work? Of course, work for them is chores and cleaning their room and that kind of thing. But then as we become adults, it's like we have to force ourselves to stop working and to play. And I thought, man, that is so true. And so that's kind of our topic today is what's the role of play in becoming all that God created us to be? Because Scripture is clear that there's a time to laugh and a time to dance. So let's start with this question. What happens to us when we get older? Why do we make this shift where play is almost the enemy of progress?
Yeah, I think part of it is what you were talking about in terms of our parents wanting us to be responsible and not to goof off, to take care of our chores first. But I also think with school, there's so much pressure for us to learn in kind of a rote fashion that it can be hard to keep up the play because we start to then internalize that and start to put pressure on ourselves to perform, to get things done, and to get the right answers, to check the list off, as opposed to thinking about how to solve problems and exploring the way that we do in play.
We go from childhood to adolescence, and we take on, or more and more responsibilities are expected of us, and as more responsibilities come into our lives, they just push out gradually all play that we're used to having as kids. We just reach a point when I think we just reach a point and look back over the course of like several years, and we're like, I don't even remember the last time I actually played.
Mm-hmm.
Or laughed.
Yeah.
When's the last time you belly laughed? It's like there's something so cathartic about just laughing.
I have some interesting commentary on adults talking about play. So here's one from a very well-known source that I will not name. Play is often interpreted as frivolous, yet the player can be intently focused on the objective, particularly when play is structured and goal-oriented as in a game. Accordingly, play can range from relaxed, free-spirited, spontaneous through frivolous to planned and even compulsive. It is also good for non-human species in the development of social skills. Now that makes me want to go out and play. I don't know when you ask a kid, what do you like to play? And they have all these answers already because they play. It's normal for them. They play. You ask an adult, what do you like to play? And they just look at you like you have two heads. Or when was the last time you played? Because the assumption is just automatically that's what kids do.
Mm-hmm.
Like when was the last time we did something just because it made us happy and we were freed from our adult responsibilities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone recently asked me, what do you do for fun? And I just found myself kind of channel surfing in my brain and like just giving these really boring answers. And I'm like, I have really become a boring person. But when you look back on the happiest times of your life, it generally involved times of life where you had a lot of play. For me, I loved college, but we played a lot, in our 18 to 22-year-old ways. Like we did jokes, we had fun. I was blessed to be able to play sports, but that's play. So there was just a lot of play in my life. And I think for all of us, if we look back on happy seasons, it typically involved play.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely looking back. And I think about two different ways that we can look at it, right? Like we can look at play in terms of absorption, like getting totally absorbed in what we're doing, like kids do, just losing track of time. And in that case, I think it kind of morphs into hobbies, right? Like woodworking, baking, where we can get totally absorbed in a hobby. But on the other hand, play is about connection. So it's getting absorbed in time, but connecting with other people at the same time. So I think I think that's where both of those things can be really hard, right? Finding the thing that gets us absorbed and gets us out of our daily groove, things that we just do purely for enjoyment, and also the things where we can connect with other people. A lot of times we do feel like we have to be more purposeful in our interactions, or we just don't have time because we're running around.
Yeah, so kind of like the social play, like
Mm-hmm.
laughing with friends. Yeah, it's such a great place of connection. And then there's like the play that, I think about what you do on Saturday mornings with the guys.
Yeah.
It's like the rough and tumble play of
me and some friends get together on some Saturday mornings, and we train various martial arts outside of when we get together, and then we come together and we do some striking rounds and some grappling rounds, and it's fun because it's friends getting together and we can push each other but also have fun and just kind of laugh when we do it. And that for me is play. And then I think about other things I do alone that are just peaceful, but they're not play because there's nobody else involved in it.
I don't think play for me would be having Julie and a couple other girlfriends get together and us wrestle around and do MMA. I just don't think that would do it for me.
Okay, but you know what I did remember? You remember when we went to the tea house, the English Rose Tea House, and we dressed up with the kooky hats, and we had a little mock tea party, which we were way too old for, but that was kind of playful. We got to pose for a photo with the queen, and we just, we enjoyed the moment.
Yeah, I don't think you and the guys would probably do that.
You really wouldn't.
So there's this quote by Dr. Stuart Brown, and he has an institute it's just about studying play, which I think is pretty cool. But he had this quote, and I think this is profound and really connects to a lot of what we do at Reset. He said, the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. What do you think of that statement?
Yeah, it's like the absence. The first, it strikes me like the absence of play creates space for depression to come in. When we don't play, we don't have those connections with other people. It can be just so detrimental to our emotional and mental health. Not to have those connections with other people, but just to have just those feelings of free and unrestricted leisure.
I totally agree that it's about being connected. And so when we're depressed, we're disconnected. So it makes sense that it's the opposite of that. I also think that it's not seeing possibility, right? Like he was making the association between being playful and being able to see possibilities, see your way out of a situation. And I think that happens to us too often, that we stay hidden, we stay in our shells, we don't come out of ourselves. It can be, I remember joining a new job where we were given an exercise to do some improv over Zoom to try to build connections with people. And it's kind of one of those like eye rolling exercises, like, oh my gosh, I do not have time for this. I either need to get work done or I need to make dinner. Yeah, exactly. And it took me a while, since these were all new people, to just get out of my comfort zone and to try to build that connection, right? It would have been so much easier to just stay in my shell rather than come out to play. And I think that can happen to us too easily in our lives, that we get used to pulling back from people, especially if we've been wounded, especially if we've been hurt in relationships. Play requires safety, and it's hard to play and have that freedom to laugh and be silly with people and to have that connection if you don't feel safe with them.
I've been chewing on this for a few minutes here. The responsibility for us not playing, I don't think we should internalize that completely, because there are a lot of things that make it so difficult for adults to play. And I think you just hit one of them is trust. That the older we get and the more wounds we collect, the harder it is to actually trust people. It seems like it's just so much easier and maybe even natural to test the waters with other kids about what we can play with them and what we can't play. But as adults, it seems like testing the waters is always to get shot down.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you brought that up, because when we were going through training for parenting kids who experience trauma, one of the things that we learned is that attachment play plays a huge role in building trust and building a bond with a child. Because if they feel like they can play with you, that then they can start to let down their guard. They can start to connect with you in new ways. So it's kind of, there's a dependency on trust to be able to enjoy yourself as an adult and to be able to play with people. But at the same time, even to kids, play indicates trust. It signals that ability to trust. So there's something there.
And I wonder if that's why it's harder to make friends as adults. I don't know if you guys have found that. It's like when I was a kid or when I was a teenager or even in college, it was so much easier. But I wonder if it's because you're way more focused on play then. So your first connections are playing together. Whereas adults, it's, we don't start with, hey, do you want to play? Do you want to go to something fun? Do you want to laugh together? But maybe that should be our starting point, is doing fun things together. I can remember going over to my friend's house all the time as a kid, just knocking on the back door, her mom opening. And my first question was always, can Mindy come out and play? But maybe that needs, in an adult way, needs to be how we build friendships, is inviting people into, maybe we don't use the word play because that would be kind of awkward, but inviting them to do something fun for that attachment piece, like you mentioned, Julie.
Something that fascinates me is watching little kids watch YouTube videos of other kids playing. Like that fascinates me, like just watching other kids playing, but being on the outside of that. But yet that's what we do too, right? We stay on the outside. We don't get in.
There's something about being around kids that just brings that out of us. Jeff and I were going through just a tough season. And when you go through a tough season, like, you just start looking inward, and it's kind of, you could just keep spiraling down if you're just looking at your problems. And somewhere along the way, it was like, we kind of forgot how to laugh and have fun. So it was my birthday, which is in July. And of course, it's like hot as Hades out here in Phoenix. And so we're like, what can we do for fun? And I found this outdoor water park that's, on a big lake. And so anyway, we signed up to do that. We go out there, they literally blow the whistle and you swim out to it. And it's probably like a third adults and 2/3 kids, which made it more fun. But anyway, you swim out there and you climb up things and there's slides and people are falling all over the place. And Jeff thought it would be a good idea to not purchase the slippers with like the rubber grips on it. And so we first swim over there, and I will never forget this. I'm like trying to run up this hill, and I get halfway up and I fall and I slide down and like collapse at his feet. And Macho Man, he says, I'll show you how it's done. And he has his bare feet. He doesn't have this. He takes 2 giant leaps for mankind and like face plants and slides back into me. I just remember we were like belly laughing. And for the next hour, just watching people fall. And we were laughing later, like standing in line with kids. Like, it was so much fun. And I just remember thinking like, like I needed that. Like something in my soul needed that. And then also thinking, why did it take so long to like just go have fun? It's such a simple antidote to some of our suffering or some of the hard seasons, is be intentional about laughing and having fun.
Yeah, it was in the back of my mind the whole time, because they give you like maybe a 20-30 minute session on this thing. And it's a big inflatable water jungle gym on a lake. It was in the back of my mind the whole time. Like, on the one hand, I can't believe I'm sharing a jungle gym with 8-year-olds. And on the other hand, I don't care. It's a lot of fun.
I'll always have that memory with the movie Shrek, that I was going through a tough season, and I remember coming home from something just weeping. And the movie Shrek had just come out in theaters, and my husband took me out to see it, even though I didn't want to be bothered with anything. And we just laughed and laughed and laughed. And that was exactly what I needed to get me out of my rut, get me out of that pit that I was in my own head.
So I've got a question for you, Julie. Do you know the Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man.
Who lives on Drury Lane? I was hoping you were going to fall for that, babe. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how playing helps us move forward and get our joy back.
Like our joy can be pretty dependent upon our connections with other people. and play is a pretty good way to build those bonds and get trust back, for people.
I've just found like in the really difficult seasons of life, like there's this tension of like if we embrace play, it's even more cathartic. I have a really close friends from home, and I remember her dad died tragically of cancer, and he wasn't that old. And they were just a fun family. Like our memories together were just laughing and having fun. And it was so tragic. But in the wake of that, we started this annual tradition where we'd have a Mrs. Independence pageant. It was all like spoofing things and making jokes about things. And it was like a little comedy show. And we did it. It was about 6 months later. We did it on the 4th of July. And I remember thinking, like, should we not be doing this? Because Mike died. But then at the same time, we were laughing again and we were having fun again. And it was super healing. And even in some of the groups that I've led, we walk through really hard things especially in our Reset Together groups. And I remember one group in particular, like there was a week where we were just crying together because people were processing hard things. And it was like this deep crying, like genuine crying together. And then 2 weeks later, we were belly laughing because of something someone said. So there's like this tension of joy and sorrow that I think need to go hand in hand. And it's part of how we heal.
Yeah. And just getting out from under, I think, is a really big part of that, right? Like we need to feel our feelings. We need to feel the sadness when it's time to be sad. But having a moment for play can get us out from under our circumstances and help us see brightness, help us see a future, help us just rekindle that joy for life that goes dormant when we go through a hard season.
So what would you guys say to a Christian listener who might be thinking, this topic is not very spiritual? Is there a biblical foundation for any of this? Like, why are you even talking about this?
Yeah, they need to be listening and paying attention more than anybody else. Ecclesiastes says, and as you mentioned it, like there's, especially chapter 3, there's a time to laugh, time to dance, time to embrace. There's a time for the heavier things in life, but there's a time for the lighter things in life too. And I mean, Jesus was fully God and he was fully human. So he laughed and he danced, told jokes around the campfire.
I wonder if in the creation story, some of the hovering over the face of the earth, if some of that wasn't God just having fun at play in his creation, getting ready to recreate the earth. I wonder if that's some of what was happening. But I love Psalm 104:26. Where the psalmist says, there the ships go to and fro, and Leviathan, which you formed to frolic there. So there is the sea. But what stands out to me there is Leviathan, so some sea creature God created to frolic or play in the sea. Like God actually created an animal just to play. And you think about like dolphins and whales that love to jump and even swim around ships just to have fun, just to be curious. And God actually created them for play. And that verse actually helped me to really enjoy the time with my dog too. I think we can feel guilty when we take time out of, our adult responsibilities to just toss a ball with a dog and think like, what's the purpose? What's the point of taking this time to play? But God himself enjoys play. And tells us to as well. Adjacent to play, I was really wrestling with, the idea of, going out for celebrations and restaurants and just the financial impact, like wanting to be a good steward of resources and things like that. But I was reminded that in the Bible, it talks all the time about just going out and killing the fatted calf to have a celebration. Like God creates those moments of celebration. I mean, not exactly play, but like there are times and seasons to just stop and celebrate moments. It doesn't have to be all work. It doesn't have to be all serious. And I think that if we're finding ourselves in a place where life is all serious, life is all responsibility, life is all work, that's a moment to stop and to reflect on why is it that we're not able to relax and enjoy play? Why is it that we're unbalanced? And to dig in there and to give ourselves that permission to play.
When you were talking about, God, the sea creatures frolicking and God just enjoying watching that, I was just thinking about watching a small kid play is so much fun when they're playing make believe, or I have nieces, and when they were young, they, just making up conversations with two little dolls in their dollhouse, and we would just be around the corner watching them. So cute and so fun watching them play. And it makes me think if God is like that when we play, even as adults, that he enjoys it when we're face planting on the water slide and, wrestling around with the guys or going to a tea party with goofy hats on. If he's, leaning over to Holy Spirit and Jesus, like, isn't that cute? Watch them. They're having fun. And I just wonder if there's some truth to that. I love the passage in Proverbs 17:22. It says, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. And I think that's really what we're talking about today, is that playing, laughing, giving ourselves permission to have fun. It's good medicine. It's good for our soul. And it actually helps take us out of really dark places. And I'm not saying playing is the only antidote to getting out of a tough season, but I do think it plays a bigger role than maybe we often give it credit for.
Yeah. This does kind of encourage me to just peek my head over the fence and see what our neighbors are doing. But then it's like, that's taking a risk. Maybe I'll get shot down. Maybe like, why are you looking in my backyard?
That's probably what would happen.
Yeah.
Well, not only in our faith, but also workplaces are discovering that people are better employees if they have a hobby, if they have interests outside of work. And I think it just makes us more well-rounded people to build in that time to play and to get that balance in our lives and to get perspective, to get our creativity and our joy back, and to give ourselves that permission, especially if we're going through a dark season.
I think for me, I think what makes me laugh. And I'm going to think about what makes me laugh. And then I want to reconnect with that. So kind of looking over what's my history with play and what's brought me pleasure and fun, and just reconnecting either with those activities or the people that I laugh best with, and making space for that and being intentional about it. It's just like anything else in life. You have to be intentional about it. You have to calendar it, make it happen.
Yeah, I think that we need to go back to what is it that we can lose ourselves in and have a connection to someone else. Just reflecting on what are those pieces that need to be in our lives. Is it revisiting playing an instrument or singing with a group? Is it something athletic where, like a mud run or something like that? What is it that is fun to us? What is it that feels playful? And reconnecting with that, but being intentional about it.
Well, I think it's appropriate that we end this discussion on play with a Chuck Norris joke. Jeff, you have a Chuck Norris joke for us?
I have a book full of Chuck Norris jokes. When Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, he found he had a voicemail from Chuck Norris.
On that note, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Reset Podcast. And don't forget to give yourself permission to play.
Thank you for listening. We hope this message encouraged you. For additional resources or information on our upcoming events, head to resetministries.us. That's resetministries.us.